Okay, Chief.
Here we go.
That is what comes next, but I wouldn't have thought we would. That requires too much setup for me to explain that. That's interesting. Because that I think that's the example of when you were saying it's shot. I feel like we kind of shot it the way we would have done a live action movie, or how I would have envisioned doing a live action movie. That's the kind of shot that in live action that would be a great day's work, and we'd get it all set up and do it. But when it becomes animated, they don't normally do it like that because it takes 2 months. That's what it took to shoot that shot.
Really?
Was 2 months. Just a long take like that with that many puppets and the cameras moving the whole time, and it's just it's an endless thing. But that one was animated by a guy named Mark Waring, who's he's the supervising animator of the film, and I don't want to say the best animator, but as experienced as any animator. And to me, it just seems like this natural performance. He's performing every character in a different way. The way Jason Schwartzman's character moves is so different from the one from Christopherson, who Eric is playing.
So will you go through with him the ways you want them to move?
Yeah.
And how much is based on the actor, and how much is based on sort of?
Well, I think the vocal performance is the first inspiration for the animator, and then we have tests that we've done with each character. So he knows that this one character is very upright and he's kind of polite, he's very polite, and the other one is kind of he has a different attitude, and he has all those, but any two animators could take all these detailed instructions and come back with such different interpretations. It so much depends on the animator, and somehow he's just juggling, because it's not just executing all these things and making these movements, it's somehow taking all this and making it seem spontaneous over the course of 7.5 weeks, and making these puppets seem like they're really alive. And if you've seen it not work, if you've seen how it can take a detour and not work, the more you know about it, from my experience, the more you know about it, the more you are in awe, or at least it's a mystery how these animators have a special kind of talent that I don't really understand. It's a great thing working with them. Each one has their personality comes through in it.
Do you think if you had known more about how long these things take, or how difficult it would be to shoot it in some ways more cinematically that way, would you not have done? Do you think in some ways not knowing made it better, so you could just sort of design it the way you wanted it?
Yeah, well, I think for one thing, not knowing meant that I was going into it as somebody who's both of us having now being 40, we've made several movies. We've been through the whole experience of, we sort of know how to. That a lot of people say no, we shouldn't do it this way,
right? And
that you can kind of just you absorb that and you ignore it or get something out of it or whatever it is. But we're definitely used to kind of getting everybody together and doing it the way we'd like to do it. And I feel like making animated film, having developed that attitude in myself, it results in something different. Mm-hmm. At least different from what from the maybe a bit different from an animated film by somebody who came up doing animation, for what that's worth.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting thing. You and I have talked about this a lot, and I think it was something. At least my impression of you is that you, like when I made Kicking and Screaming, which was my first movie, which is the same year you made Bottle Rocket, and we didn't know each other then, but I feel like I look back at that movie and I did a lot of things in that movie because I was told that was the way you do it, because I hadn't been to film school. I didn't do it sort of the same way. You and I in some ways came to it similarly in totally different areas, but I did things like looping that I wouldn't have done. I did the way we cut it. I let the editor cut it first, and then I went and it took me even a couple movies to kind of learn, you don't have to actually do it this way. I was really impressed, at least it's my fantasy of you. You might be able to, I'm sure you have examples that are where you did things you wish you hadn't. But that you knew immediately, no, I'm not going to do it like that. I want to do it this way.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think you mean doing Bottle Rocket?
Doing Bottle Rocket, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. I feel like I was never more confident in my life than when we made that film.
Yeah.
And never less confident than when we screened it. Mm-hmm. The first time we screened it was part 2 of my life. Because up to that point, my attitude was, just wait till they see this.
Right.
And a lot of people were, does this story hold together, or do people going to understand why these boys are acting like this? And I was like, I think they're going to understand. It's pretty funny. And then we screened it in you've heard me tell this many times, I suppose, but
maybe they
relive it.
Yeah.
Yes. We screened it in Santa Monica at the AMC 17 or something like that on the 3rd Street Promenade.
For an audience.
For an audience of 400 people. And as the reels unspooled, I was sitting in the back row with all the studio executives, everybody, and I began to see people leaving, and they were leaving in groups. People don't go to the bathroom in groups. They're not coming back.
Uh-huh.
They take their coats. And it became, really excruciating. At a certain point, I left. I tried to be very discreet about it because I didn't want to add to the Exodus feeling, but I also couldn't take it. And I watched. I went up to the projection booth and watched, and they just left all through the film, and it was really a miserable thing. But I remember afterwards we had the audience cards, the reactions, and they just you get the SUCKD. That's the sort of thing you had, and a lot of things where favorite whatever none,
right.
One after another, but I remember that we were going through it, we were kind of analyzing it. Everyone's feeling bad for me, that I won't be able to do this with my life, and then I remember then I got one of these, and it was like a outline of a dissertation. This girl had sat there a lot longer than everybody else, and she'd written a whole thing, and she quoted things, and she said this stuff, and I was like, and I remember in the room, I was like, this is our audience. There was literally one positive thing, and I didn't get I was like, she's getting everything. A few years later, several years, like 6 years later, I was at some kind of function, and this girl, some kind of film thing or a DGA thing or something, and this girl afterwards introduced herself to me and says, I was at your screening in Santa Monica. I was like, I know who you are. I know exactly who you are. She was uncomfortable. She wasn't sure what I was talking about. No, I know you. So anyway,